Hurricane Erin has exploded into a massive hurricane as it tracks close to the east coast of the US. Storm surge and high waves are already causing damage, and strong wind gusts and tropical storm conditions are expected to reach the North Carolina coast very soon. In this update, I'm about to show you the latest information on Hurricane Erin and the expected impacts, plus a couple other disturbances lining up behind it. But first, if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button for more tropical weather updates. So here's a look at the infrared satellite imagery of Hurricane Erin, and we can see that it actually is intensifying, but it's a very massive hurricane. We have a concentric eye wall type structure where we have this outer eye wall to the north part of the storm system, and then we have the main inner eye wall and actually a small eye apparent on the satellite imagery. Here's a look at the visible satellite showing that eye. You could see that it's a very well-organized, powerful hurricane. And it's actually a high-end Category 2 right now, expected to reach major hurricane intensity tonight going into tomorrow as it makes that close approach to the North Carolina coast before it turns off to the northeast. But you can see the outflow is expanding across the east coast of the U.S. The main part of the storm is expected to move into the North Carolina coastline pretty soon with those tropical storm force winds, even though the center is well offshore. So that just shows how big the wind field is and how huge this hurricane is. We have the outflow extending across South Carolina, North Carolina, even going all the way up towards New Jersey and even New York City with the outflow. And then Bermuda is over here also seeing that outflow. And this is about halfway in between North Carolina and Bermuda, actually slightly closer to North Carolina, but still a very huge hurricane expanding across a big section of the Atlantic. From the NHC, maximum sustained winds are 110 miles an hour, minimum pressure is 943 millibars, moving north at 14 miles an hour, so now it's moving north before it is expected to turn off to the northeast starting tomorrow, Thursday night, going into Friday. It really takes off going northeast. Then we have a disturbance near the Leeward Islands in the tropical Atlantic with a 60% chance of formation in the next 7 days. That's pretty much unchanged from a couple days ago. This one looks like it is probably going to get close to the northeastern Caribbean before turning, potentially impacting Bermuda by the middle of next week. And then we have this disturbance with a 40% chance of formation, up from the 30% chance yesterday. Invest 99. It's not super organized. Conditions are somewhat favorable for additional development, but then over the next few days, conditions are going to become more unfavorable with a lot of wind shear and stuff like that. But these disturbances are not expected to impact any land areas, so the big thing is going to be Hurricane Erin. Here's the latest cone. You can see there are tropical storm warnings in place for the Outer Banks of North Carolina, the coast of North Carolina, the coast of Virginia, and the Virginia part of the Delmarva Peninsula. Looking at tropical storm warnings, there are also storm surge warnings in place for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Apparently, North Carolina is under a state of emergency, and there have been evacuations along the Outer Banks because there's going to be a lot of that storm surge moving in and high waves that could cause significant damage. Some of those high waves are already causing problems. The tropical storm force wind field hasn't even moved in yet, but it is expected to over the next few hours going into tonight. And then it is expected to regain major hurricane intensity tonight going into Thursday and then return to the northeast. So after about Thursday afternoon, those tropical storm force winds should be moving away from the East Coast, except potential tropical storm force wind gusts going into Friday around Cape Cod, and then later on Friday into Saturday, potential strong wind gusts along the coast of Nova Scotia. Then it weakens down to tropical storm intensity as it moves off to the northeast and is expected to become a post-tropical cyclone and could make it all the way to Europe by early next week. Here are the key messages for Hurricane Erin. It's expected to produce life-threatening surf and rip currents along the Bahamas, the East Coast, Bermuda, and Atlantic Canada over the next several days. That's going to continue with the high waves and rip currents, and also storm surge, flooding, and tropical storm conditions are expected in the North Carolina Outer Banks beginning later today, lasting through Thursday, along with large waves leading to significant beach erosion and overwash which could make some roads impassable. Tropical storm conditions expected on Thursday along the Virginia coast, with tropical storm force wind gusts likely along portions of the mid-Atlantic and New England coasts Thursday through early Friday. Tropical storm conditions are also possible on Bermuda on Thursday and Friday. So this massive wind field of Hurricane Erin will be affecting a lot of locations. Here's a look at the wind gust forecast. This is around 10 p.m. tonight. We're looking at those tropical storm force wind gusts moving into the Outer Banks of North Carolina, 40 miles an hour at Cape Hatteras. Then as we go through the night, those wind gusts will increase all the way over 50 miles per hour. The National Weather Service is predicting wind gusts to exceed 50 miles per hour in the Outer Banks, potentially approaching 60 miles an hour in some places. Some of the forecast models were showing even slightly higher wind gusts, but wind gusts could reach 60 miles an hour around Cape Hatteras around 2 a.m. tonight and Thursday morning. Then we have those strong wind gusts continuing, going into 5 a.m. on Thursday. Still wind gusts around 56 miles per hour at Cape Hatteras. And then we're also seeing some of those wind gusts increasing further north towards Virginia Beach and the Delmarva Peninsula, looking at those wind gusts reaching 39 miles an hour. That's tropical storm force wind gusts at Virginia Beach by 7 a.m. on Thursday. And the winds are decreasing further south in North Carolina, like around Jacksonville or Wilmington, even Morehead City dropping below tropical storm force wind gusts by 8 a.m. on Thursday, but still some very strong winds around Cape Hatteras, still around that 55 to 60 mile an hour wind gust range. Then we're still looking at tropical storm force wind gusts at Virginia Beach, 43 miles an hour going into 10 a.m. on Thursday. And then those wind gusts still pretty strong at Cape Hatteras, still 50 miles an hour by noon on Thursday. And that will continue even later in the afternoon, still seeing some of those strong wind gusts before things start to quiet down later in the evening, with those wind gusts dropping back down to around 35 to 40 miles per hour along the coast near Virginia Beach and Cape Hatteras. But then those wind gusts start moving northward. We can see some of those tropical storm force wind gusts along the coast of New Jersey, even potentially reaching Long Island with those tropical storm force wind gusts going into Thursday evening. And then as Hurricane Erin lifts off to the northeast, we can see 45 mile an hour wind gusts going into midnight on Friday over Cape Cod. And then that stays about the same going through Thursday night into early Friday. Still looking at those pretty strong wind gusts. By the time we go into Friday, those wind gusts are going to start to lessen across parts of the northeast. Then the coast of Nova Scotia will have to be looking at potential for strong wind gusts going into later on Friday into Saturday, with wind gusts around 30 to 40 miles per hour expected from the latest forecast models. And then as it lifts off to the northeast, still looking at wind gusts approaching 40 miles per hour along the southern coast of Newfoundland, going into Saturday late morning, early afternoon time frame. So that's your wind gust forecast. Now, what about the storm surge? There's up to 4 feet of storm surge is expected between Duck and Cape Lookout, North Carolina, and the Outer Banks. That's why there are storm surge warnings in place for that. That forecast is pretty much unchanged. Now, what has changed, the storm surge has actually expanded north. So we're looking at 1 to 3 feet of storm surge from the South Santee River up to Cape Lookout in North Carolina and South Carolina. That's about the same. And even in the lower Chesapeake Bay, looking at the same amount of storm surge. But what they've added is actually we're looking at the east coast of the Delmarva Peninsula all the way up to New Jersey, looking at potentially 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. So that's a little bit more storm surge extending further north along the east coast of the U.S. So that's going to be something to watch over the next couple days. And also, it's not just the storm surge. That storm surge is going to be going along with some pretty high waves, potentially looking at waves around 15 feet right now. But as we go through tonight, those waves along the Outer Banks of North Carolina, looking at around 20-foot waves. And that's pretty much going through tonight. By early Thursday, those waves start to diminish. But then as Hurricane Erin starts moving to the north, we're looking at those 15 to 20 foot waves on the east coast of New Jersey and the Delmarva Peninsula. So that's going to be a significant problem. And then the northeast is going to be looking at some high waves as well, 15 feet or so, going into Thursday night and Friday before those waves start moving off towards Nova Scotia. Still looking around 15-foot waves, but in the center of the storm, where we have those very strong winds, potentially Category 3 hurricane force winds, looking at waves up to 50 feet, with individual waves probably as high as 100 feet. Here's the intensity guidance for Hurricane Erin. How strong is it going to get, if at all? We're looking at potentially reaching major hurricane intensity once again, just off the coast of North Carolina, potentially looking at a Category 3 hurricane tonight, going into tomorrow, before after the next 24 to 36 hours it drops below major hurricane intensity as it enters a higher wind shear environment, because right now it's over some very warm sea surface temperatures and light wind shear. But that shear is going to be increasing over the next couple days as it starts to move into a more extratropical environment. It will begin weakening down, but it is a very large hurricane regardless of the intensity. The NHC was mentioning that it's basically larger than 75% of hurricanes at where it's located. It's larger than 75% of hurricanes that are usually in that location. It could drop below hurricane intensity in about 72 hours before it becomes a post-tropical cyclone. Now here's the HWRF model showing tonight, looking at potentially a high-end Category 2 hurricane, maybe even a Category 3. They're showing minimum pressure down to 928 millibars. That's probably a bit low, but indicates it's a very intense and very large hurricane, and that big pressure gradient is going to amplify the storm surge and the wind gusts. We're looking at tropical storm force winds affecting the east coast of North Carolina, the Outer Banks. Then those tropical storm force winds expand towards the coast of the mid-Atlantic coast of New Jersey, even Long Island and Cape Cod, before getting close to Nova Scotia, heading into Friday and Saturday, before it moves out, and as you can see, it becomes an extratropical cyclone headed towards Iceland and also Ireland, going into the early part of next week. The GFS model showing Hurricane Erin moving very close to the coast of North Carolina before it turns and moves off to the northeast as an extratropical cyclone by this weekend. Not going to do much of anything after that, but then we're watching that other disturbance with a 60% chance of formation down here near the northeastern Caribbean. Could bring some heavy rain and potential wind gusts to the northeast Caribbean before it actually turns behind Erin. So it's really going to be following Erin instead of seeing a high pressure ridge rebuilding in the Atlantic, pushing it west. We're seeing it turns, becomes mostly a fish storm, and it begins intensifying because we do have pretty light wind shear, pretty warm sea surface temperatures, and decent moisture. This starts to intensify into a very compact tropical storm, even a hurricane, before it moves very close to Bermuda, potentially a direct hit, according to this run of the GFS model. So Bermuda should be watching this going into the Monday through Wednesday time frame before this actually gets pulled into a frontal system very quickly and gets taken away. And then after that, we're not looking at a whole lot of tropical activity until we go into early September. Then we'll have to watch the Central American gyre for a potential storm system in the Gulf. And the GFS is painting a major hurricane slamming into the Gulf Coast. Now, that's very unlikely at this point in time, but still, it's just an indication that we do have to watch the Central American gyre heading into early September. And if anything does go into the Gulf, it will have an opportunity to rapidly intensify with some of those very warm sea surface temperatures. That's basically the warmest part of the Atlantic right now. Here's a look at the MJO. Really, it's unfavorable right now, but Hurricane Erin is already established. But that other disturbance could turn into something, but really not a whole lot of activity after that. Going into the August 25th time frame, it's looking very unfavorable across both the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic. So not much expected there until we get into the very end of August, going into early September. That's when things look more favorable over the Eastern Pacific and the Western Atlantic. That's where we're seeing the Central American gyre potentially heating up. Also, Africa is looking a little bit more favorable after the August 25th timeframe, going all the way into mid-September. So that's going to be something to watch as we go towards the climatological peak of the hurricane season in September. So that's the latest update on what's happening with Hurricane Erin and any potential tropical activity after that. So thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already, share the video, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more weather updates on the tropics. Thanks for watching. Extreme Weather Zone, out.